You're listening to the Doc Lounge podcast. This is a place for candid conversations with healthcare industry's top physicians, executives, and thought leaders. This podcast is made possible by Pacific Companies, your trusted advisor in physician recruitment. I am your host, Summer Gilbert, and I am the Director of Marketing and Branding here at Pacific Companies. And my co-host today is Pacific Companies Senior Vice President of Business Development, Mr. Harold Livingston. Today on the podcast, we're doing another Power of Partnership series, and our guest is a very special friend of Pacific Companies, Steve Jacobs. Steve is a senior physician recruiter for Einstein Health Network. So we have partnered with Steve for many years now, and if there is anyone qualified to talk about that important relationship between a healthcare facility and a physician recruitment firm, that would be Steve. So let's get started. Well, first, Steve, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And just so the listeners get a little bit more comfortable with you, give us a little bit of a history about how you got to where you are right now in the healthcare industry.
So the quick version is I was an educator before I was a recruiter. And in 2003, that took a turn for the worse in terms of the economy and just wasn't the right place for me to be at that time. I was kind of just in the job market floating around. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And I got a solicitation from Merritt Hawkins about becoming a physician recruiter, something I knew nothing about. I knew I liked medicine, but I didn't know, what a recruiter did or what was involved in that. Fast forward, I get through Merritt Hawkins. I spend 3 years there. And then I come to Pacific Companies in 2006. After my time, at Merritt and getting trained there, I found a home, with Chris and Gary and John, kind of bringing me along in a different way than Merritt Hawkins had done it. And during that process in 2008, one of my clients, Korea Delta, asked me if I would come and start an in-house recruitment department for them. Having been one of Pacific Company's clients for, I think, 2 or 3 years up until that point. So I went to John and I said, listen, they're kind of giving me an opportunity to step out of the commission world and into a salaried position, and I want to do it. And he said, go ahead. And so that's how I got on the bridge to the in-house side. I built that program in Korea, spent 4 years there. I wanted more out of my career. I knew I wanted to be a director, so I moved to Ohio to be able to direct. Unfortunately, didn't ask all the right questions of the group, which was about $22 million underwater when I joined them. And then, moved from there to WellSpan back in, 2012, 2013. Spent 5 years there, and now I'm in Philadelphia at Einstein.
Wow. So, healthcare is in your blood. You've been doing it for a long time.
I've been doing it, long enough to pick up, I think Harold can attest to this. You pick up nuggets along the way and you just tuck them away because you never know when you're going to use them, when you need them. So you listen to conversations about immigration and you listen to conversations about, 340B plans and Medicare and, just all kinds of just keep your ears open kind of information. And then, all of a sudden 17, 18 years goes by and you're like this hub of useless information at times. And other times you're just, you get to speak kind of expertly on certain things.
Yeah. Well, we know that, the subject of this podcast is to talk about the power of partnership. And we've seen time and time again, the foundation for success in physician recruitment is all within the relationship with a health system and a recruitment firm. So Steve, tell us about some of your experience working with recruitment firms in the past before you got with Pacific Companies.
It's been kind of the fundamental principle of my career to find like-minded folks like myself that I can not only, business connect with, but also personally connect with, people who I, can tell usually within a couple of minutes that we're going to be good for one another, from a business standpoint, that we get each other. I mean, Harold knows my sense of humor. I know his sense of humor. Those things are evident to me, when I interview people and interview firms and look at agencies. I can tell right away when, this person is, either just about the business and it's about how many CVs they can send me versus, hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Mm-hmm. This is a long-term relationship that I want to be in, so that you're coming to me with your searches on a regular basis and giving me, giving me what you have, because you trust that I can do the job. So a lot of the times, what you see is the sales part of what we do is a big part of it. And sometimes to our detriment, people only see us as kind of used car salesmen, and, you're selling the jobs that your organization has. And in that vein, that's where it goes awry, right? So you've got the people who are just sales oriented. It's all they've ever known, all they ever do. And it's all about moving this widget into that, product line and getting it sold to the customer, hands down. But there's an entire industry around us where relationships are almost socially networked. It's like having your own Facebook for recruiting. There's only a finite number of people that do what we do, whether it's, whatever you want to say it is, 1,500, 1,800 people. If you look at APPR's roll call for members, maybe all the way up to 2,000. But, in a population of 350 million people, 2,000 people doing physician recruitment is a tiny, tiny little, marketplace. And so we bang into each other. We see each other all the time. We pass information to each other. We review firms and we give information to each other. And Harold knows that, and anybody who's worth their salt in the business knows that that's what happens, in terms of how you deliver, customer service. So I think that the piece of us that becomes professional, not just the sales part, but the professional side of physician recruitment, has very much to do with the relationship building, component, and how you go about, kind of relaying the information that you need to relay to the different, entities. So I learned that, and I'm lucky having learned that on the outside and the inside. Mm-hmm. So I've been on the outside going to clients and saying, this is what we can do for you. And they either believe me or they don't. And then I have the other side of it where I'm now the customer, and Harold's coming to me and saying, well, we can do it. You believe that I can do it or I won't. Mm-hmm. So I've had a lot of experience seeing, both sides of it. It makes me very unique in this business, because not a lot of people can say they've worked for an agency. And there's probably, I don't know, Harold, maybe 10, 15% of us, on the in-house side that have done outside, recruitment from a firm standpoint, maybe mm-hmm. less.
Yeah, I mean, Steve's a little bit of a unicorn there in that he's done both, even though when you look at the number of AAPPR members and even people that aren't membership in the member that are doing it for community health centers or the VA and things like that, it is rather unique that he's one of the, I wouldn't even say it's 10%, might be less than that. Yeah. Maybe 5%, but they have that unique unicorn perspective that they can see both sides. Mm-hmm. And I always say, like, when I'm looking to build a partnership, it's, and you have to define what's right, but I always look at, how do you build the right, RIGHT type of partnership? And there's really 10 criteria that I go through when doing that to build, a very, very strong one that I look at. And number one is to be supportive and collaborative. That's the number one, is to do it that, Steve is not a commodity to me. Steve is my friend. And for us to have a partnership, there has to be a mutual reward in that partnership. There has to be a morale building. Steve and I have built the kind of partnership that when Steve's having a bad day or vice versa, when I can call Steve and he goes like, and he'll answer the phone, call him on my cell so he knows it's me, and he'll go like, okay, what do you want? Jokingly. And I'll go like, oh, man, I am just having a day. It's one of those days, some days you eat the bear and some days the bear eats you, and I've been eating. And he laughs. He says, oh, yeah. And Steve can do the same. And I've been blessed that I have a lot of people that fall under that. But, part of that criteria is, you're protective. I mean, Steve can be he's very upfront with me. He's very straightforward with me, which is what I look for in a partner. That's a good partnership. And that it adds a catalyst that we can actually get things done, and we want each other to be successful. But we don't look at each other as a commodity. It doesn't matter if Steve does business with me or not. If he calls me up, I'm going to take his call, and we're going to discuss the marketplace. And hopefully I can give value to him as to what he's doing. It doesn't matter if he engages me on a search. And Steve knows that.
I think one of the things out of the gate, Summer, is a sense of shared ownership, right? So I come to Harold, and I say, Harold, I have this need. If it's locums or perm or whatever, I need you to fill it. I'm not coming to ask him to see how many CVs he can send me. I don't really care. I need him to fill it, right? So I need him to then say, you know what? You give me the parameters. I have the parameters. Okay, I understand the job. I'm, now going to put it back to the team, and I'm now taking ownership of it, right? It's mine, and we're going to do our darndest to fill it. I know there's no guarantees in life. I'm not that naive to think that there are, but I know if Harold asks me more questions and gains more information, then he's taking ownership of it. The downfall that I see most of the time that happens with agencies who are more in that salesy mode is they get the basics and off they go, and they're like running in the dark, and so then candidates ask them questions, and then I get 6 emails back. Can you answer this question and answer this question? And I knew it was going to be a disaster from the start. And so those people don't even get the light of day from me, in terms of that, because they're not going to enter into a joint venture. And, really that's what it is a joint venture. You're going to put some skin in the game. I'm going to put some skin in the game. And together we're going to be successful. That's the goal. The goal is to be successful.
And Steve and I joke about this, but it's kind of like for people out there that are married, it's like when you get married, when you both say I do, it doesn't end there. That's the beginning of that's the beginning of the hard work of the partnership that you have to move forward. And what I see from my side, the biggest mistake that people from my side of the recruitment, the firms do, they don't do their homework. They don't really take the time to understand what people like Steve go through. And I have to even train that with my recruitment team. Like, listen, if you send Steve an email Monday morning at 8 a.m. his time and he doesn't respond by 8:05, don't be picking up the phone and calling him. Give him some time, because you need to understand the environment he's in. I have some clients that, like Steve, that they're very, very good in-house recruiters, and they might have people interviewing all week long, and sometimes they just don't have time to return your call because they have candidates in. And Steve, you know this, you might have candidates in for 3 or 4 days in a row. And by the time you get a chance to really look at your email and go through everything, you could have 1,000 emails.
Oh, yeah. Very easily. And very easily. I think the hard part for the firms is, every candidate has an egg timer that gets flipped the minute you engage them, right? So it's like fine wine or cheese or whatever. They age, and they age quickly. And the hope is that they don't go moldy. You hopefully you're doing it in a timely fashion that allows the candidate to stay viable. Mm-hmm. But I have about 75 different parts to my job. And an in-house recruiter across the board is going to have more than 2 jobs. They're responsible, more than 2 hats that they wear. From a firm standpoint, you may have more clients than just me, and I understand that. But, you're usually looking for clients in a cluster, whether it be family medicine or hospitalist or whatever it may be. But your focus is generally kind of singular. You're mm-hmm. looking at candidates, and you're trying to disseminate, okay, that candidate goes to this client. This one's a better fit over here, that kind of stuff. I'm, on the other hand, spinning 57 plates, and somebody's adding 10 more, every hour in terms of what's happening. So as Harold said, I can't get back to you as fast as I would like to. But I don't know if Harold would agree, but I think I get back to people pretty quickly with a clearance. Yeah, that person's clear. Send over the present. Yeah, we looked at it. No, it's not somebody that, that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. It's not a fit. And then Harold said, well, why is it not a fit? We have the parameters. Why is it not a fit? And I'll give him the reasons if something's changed in the parameters or something's happened, that gives him, an idea of how to whittle it down a little bit more, or maybe, look for some different parameters for the candidates that, that we might have changed now in a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Einstein is still new to the locums game. We don't do a lot of locums compared to what I, came from WellSpan. And so they're still very much kind of, as Harold knows and has seen, we get a lot of fits and starts and lots of, hey, Harold, find me a breast imaging, radiologist. And then, oh, sorry, it got canceled, in like 5 days, because they don't know what they're doing. And I'm still educating the system as to how we do it. If you tell me to go to market, I have enough people at my beck and call to go to market within an hour. And I will have candidates within 5 hours, from that standpoint. So it's that's a particularly, worrisome part for me, because I have to ask them, are you ready to see candidates? Well, no, we're not ready to see candidates. We don't want to see, we just want to see what's out there. And I'm like, we can't do that. That's not how it works. You have to have a bona fide, assignment and ready to go. Cause I hate having those phone calls with Harold when I call him up and say, hey buddy, that one we were working on, we're not working on it anymore. So it's done.
Well, Steve, listen, that's because we do perm and locums, and that's part of the locums business that you do that. And that's just part of our service. When we go in, that's one of the 10 things. We have to go in and give service, and we have to do it from a very selfless position, understanding that, we're providing this to the client so that they have an option, and they may never pick up on that option, and it changes. And whether that's Steve or any other recruiter or practice administrator or CEO, this is very, very common that things change. A big issue, I just had this happen down in the Carolinas, that we had set up coverage for psychiatry, inpatient psychiatry for a year, and the gentleman that was going to the head of psychiatry is going to retire, decided not to retire. So they just didn't need someone, and that's fine. That's just part of a partnership. And I always say, when you go through as a firm, that's part of the ground rules. We need to explain that to the client, and go to Steve. Steve, I understand the ground rules. I am not going to look at you in any way other than a positive manner through this, even if you have to change that, because I understand those are things beyond your control. Mutual respect, but I have to respect the fact that Steve is making the right decision for my client, and my client should always come first. I should want him to make the right decision, and then I should always go forward working with him and make what I think is the right decision for Steve or my client. As part of being a partner, that's their final decision. But if we build a good partnership, it's the right kind of partnership. After a while, I'm going to know what they want me to do to make the right decision. And the right decision is what's best for their patients, their facility, moving forward.
And Steve, how do you decide what candidates that you take on internally and then ones that you try and find with a firm?
I think most of the time that comes down to the specialty that we're looking for and what over 18 years I've determined to be the pool size. So if I'm looking for child neurology, it's a high demand specialty in the United States, but the pool of candidates that I know I have access to is probably tiny, in terms of the reach that I would have. And in most of those child neurology searches, as Harold can attest to, you're usually kind of talking somebody out of one job and into another, and maybe moving states, versus finding, 6 or 10 of them in the city in which you live or are recruiting to.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the time, and Harold and I always chuckle about this because, I reach out to Harold when I have my most difficult searches, when I know it's a needle in a needle stack kind of search. I'm like, hey, I could use some help over here finding a one-legged, ophthalmologist with blue eyes. And then he's like, all right, well, we'll give it a shot and see if we can find one. But I have this conversation I've had this conversation with other companies over the many years. I'm not going to give you family medicine and we can take H-1Bs, you know, and make it like a layup. I will, if I'm doing, you know, volume with people, I will throw, quote, an easy one in there, you know. But really for me, it's always been about the fact that if the firm wants to help, then they'll help when we need it the most.
Yeah.
And so we get to a point where there are just searches we've had open a year, 2 years, 3 years, and we just can't find any other traction. You know, we can't source anywhere else on our own. And so we'll bring in a firm, you know, to help us with that. As Harold knows, I'm a pretty good recruiter. So getting the opportunity with me, I have to be able to cry uncle myself to say, you know what, I can't do this. I can't do this one. That doesn't happen very often. But certainly, you know, from volume standpoint, if I have 30 searches, I'm no good, you know, at 30 searches. I'm better at 20, and then, you know, giving Harold 10 and saying, you know, these are the hardest ones, and this is what I want you to work on, you know, and work that way. But I think for some people, you'd have to realize what your own threshold is, how effective you are at that threshold. And then anything above that threshold, is it really actually hurting you to continue to kind of try and hold on to those searches without giving them to a firm, you know, to assist you? Because I think in the long run, you end up hurting yourself with too many.
Yeah.
But I see that when people do it, it usually comes down to what their workload is, and then I would add in a sense of urgency when it is a mission critical, especially on the perm side. Because we do perm and locums, and locums is a necessary part of this business for healthcare facilities, but it can be an expensive option. But the reason it exists is because we deal with people, and you never know when people are going to leave. You never know. You know, you have certain parts of the country that are seeing a huge influx of people moving from major metropolitan areas to a little bit more suburbia and rural areas and things like that, and then all of a sudden they need the physicians. So they go like, wow, we went from having, you know, a sustainable, manageable recruitment to our whole orthopedic group just left, and we need 8 orthopedic surgeons. Well, orthopedic surgery is, if not the top, one of the top revenue generators. DRGs in a system, if you're missing 8 orthopedic surgeons, I mean, that could be $60 to $80 million in inpatient revenue for a facility.
Yeah.
So that's when they bring in, you know, people like us to come in and help.
And you've seen that in COVID time. You know, you see that now with I need 5 pulmonologists tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, and either perm or locums. It's you know, COVID's pushed us into that mentality. It's not normal to need, you know, 15 GIs to build up your group. I mean, your retention program is probably terrible if you need 15 GIs to replace the ones you have. But, you know, COVID's definitely pushed the limits in terms of what we need and when we need it.
So, Steve, a lot of our listeners are hospital administrators, and so any of the health systems and clinics, hospitals listening to this episode, what advice would you give them when they're ready to partner with a physician recruitment firm? What should they look for?
Well, I think you look for a couple of things. You look for longevity. You know, you're looking for people who have done the job for a while, who have a track record, who can prove to you that they've made, you know, not only placements in your state, but in your city or your town, you know, whatever it may be, that can give you good references, you know, that can speak to the caliber of your work and your abilities to get the job done. I think the firm, you need to ask the firm about data, you know, how long does it take them to fill their average searches? What does that look like by specialty? You know, how long does it take for a neurosurgeon versus a family practice doctor? You know, I always ask about, you know, what are their top searches right now that they're working on. You know, there are a lot of times when, you know, 1 or 2 recruiters feed, you know, 40 different clients, and you're mail piece or your social, networking campaign or whatever goes to feed other situations. And I don't have a problem with that. You just have to know that up front, to Harold's point, you just have to get the ground rules, established. But I think the referencing, and then, for us on the inside, we talk to each other, hey, what do you know about Pacific companies? Have you worked with them? Have they been successful? Were they easy to deal with? Who's their marketer? Who's their recruiters? Do you recommend anybody, within the firm that was particularly good at listening to you, at getting, the information, at presenting candidates in a timely manner? Because really, you're trying to maintain, it's a symbiotic relationship. Okay. It goes both ways, but ultimately I don't work for the firm, so I'm not at the point where, as Harold said, you call me up 40 times in the day to ask me questions about CVs you've sent over that I don't, I don't have another job to do.
Yeah.
So it's about me bringing you onto my team, right? You're coming to work for my organization to represent my organization as an extension of me. And so, if I'm vouching for somebody, if I'm saying this company can get the job done, then, Harold already knows that about me. I say that all the time. And then I go to Harold, I go, okay, we got to get the job done. That's the charge, that I have with him when I talk to him, and he knows that. I don't think he's sitting around waiting just to grab contracts and see how many he can stack on his desk. He wants to get the job done. Yeah. So, it becomes important for you to interview the firm. It's important for you to ask questions about their productivity, about their, length of contract in terms of, how long does it take from the time you sign to the time you place, how the structure is in place, how many recruiters are assigned to your search, how many recruiters, have been with you for a year, 5 years, 10 years. I know all the physician recruiters at Pacific companies have been there about a year.
3 weeks. 3 weeks.
But yeah, I think it's just, it's an interview process like you would for any other service that you're trying to hire. You want to make sure that you're getting, what's billed. If you say you can do the job, then you better do the job.
Amen to that. And Steve, thank you so much for giving us your time today and letting us pick your brain on this subject. We really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. A shout out to Horatio, and a shout out to Ian, and a shout out to David Rubio and John and the King and Gary and Patrick. I miss you guys. I'm going to try and come to California next month and stop by the office and say hello.
Yay. Perfect.
All right, guys.
Okay. Take care, buddy. All the best.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Summer. Bye-bye.
No problem. Bye. Thank you to all our listeners. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes air, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And a big thank you to Pacific Companies. Without you guys, this podcast could not be possible. If you would like to be a guest, go to www.pacificcompanies.com. Thank you.